Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. The Tower of Silence.
There is a forbidden tower deep in the jungles of India where mysterious rituals have been carried out for centuries. The tower belongs to a small group of Zoroastrians, maintaining their ancient customs that date back an estimated 3,000 years.
Zoroastrianism officially entered the history records in the 6th century BC, though it may have been around for over 1,000 years before that, with no documentation. The ancient Iranian religion is one of the oldest in the world, and much like Christianity, was based on the teachings of a self-proclaimed prophet. This prophet was Zoroaster, who taught his disciples about the ultimate quest for goodness. The religion teaches that there is pure good and pure evil in the world, but the good will always triumph. They were also one of the first religions to have a supreme benevolent deity. It went by the name Ahura Mazda, or Lord of Wisdom. You won't find too many Zoroastrians wandering the streets today. Most of them are long extinct, and there are ruined Zoroastrian temples all across Persia. Even though the eternal flame still burns at the fire temple in Yazd, Zoroastrianism has mostly fizzled out. It started to decline with the rise of Judaism, then Christianity, but it was the creation of Islam in the 7th century AD that truly killed the faith. The few Zoroastrians left can be found in North America, India, and Iran. Do you know any Zoroastrian? Let me know in the comments. There is a small band of Zoroastrians still thriving in Mumbai, India. They have a community that practices ancient burial customs at a funerary tower inside a 54-acre forest. As per tradition, whenever one of their community members dies, their body is placed at the top of the Tower of Silence on a flat platform. The body remains in the brutal heat of the sun, decomposing until scavenger birds pick up the scent. The vultures then descend on the Tower of Silence, picking apart the deceased until nothing remains. The Tower of Silence is forbidden to outsiders. You are not allowed to step foot on the platforms where so many devotees of Zoroastrianism have been eaten by vultures. This is very ancient, sacred stuff right out of myths. There are 3 main rows on the tower. The outermost row is for men, the center row for women, and the core is for children. There is a small chamber inside the tower where prayers can be said. The tower was built about 300 years ago and has been used consistently since then. However, a changing climate has led to the steep decline in the vulture population. It looks like soon the vultures might all be gone, and there will be no birds of prey left to pick apart the remains of the dead.
And now for number 9. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Dina Sam for the super thanks, and for your recommendation. We appreciate your feedback. If you are new, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. We'd love to have you.
Number 9. The Bank of England's Gold Vault. The Bank of England is one of the richest in the world, and its vaults are impenetrable. If there is one modern forbidden place you're never going to enter, it's the Gold Vaults, hidden underneath the Bank of England. These ultra-secure rooms hold over $200 billion worth of solid gold bars. There are so many gold bars in the vaults that if you stacked them on top of each other, you could make 46 Eiffel Towers. That's about 5,659 tons of gold as of 2019. And yet that's only 1/5 of all the gold in the entire world. It's still a very impressive collection, and it's all squirreled away far beneath Threadneedle Street in London. The history of the bank and its vaults goes back further than you might think. The bank was founded in 1694, making it the 8th oldest bank in the world. Starting in 1734, the bank established its base of operations on Threadneedle Street in the heart of London. It was originally owned by the stockholders, but became a nationalized bank in 1946. The underground vault was built shortly before World War II in the 1930s. I've been saying vaults a lot because the true scope of the underground is immense. There is a main vault, singular, that's about 300,000 square feet. That's nearly 10 football fields, and all of it is encased in thick concrete walls. But inside the main vault are smaller vaults where the gold bars are stored on shelves. So many gold bars that they could make you the richest person in the world.
The Bank of England says they have never been robbed. Their vaults are protected by a comprehensive electronic security system. They have voice recognition, complex locks, and keys that are over 3 feet long, so don't get any ideas.
The Bank of England is almost as secure as the United States Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the biggest gold repository in the world, with a quarter of the planet's gold stashed inside. Number 8. The gates of hell closed. There has been a fiery crater burning in the Karakum Desert of Turkmenistan since 1971. Near the tiny village of Darvaza, where only 350 people live, is what looks like a burning red pit that leads down to Hades. The hole is 230 feet wide and known locally as the doorway to hell, or the gateway to hell. It's so bright and so hot that its fiery red glow can be seen for miles in every direction. It's not literally a gateway to the realm of the damned, but in fact the result of an accident that happened in the 1970s. The Soviets were out in the desert drilling for oil when their rig accidentally broke into a huge underground gas cavern. This was a pocket in the earth full of natural gas, so it was like drilling into a gigantic gas tank full of fumes. The ground collapsed, the entire drilling rig fell into the pit, and poisonous fumes leaked out. The Soviets tried desperately to stop the inevitable catastrophe by lighting the hole on fire. They figured the natural gas would burn itself out in a few weeks. But it's been over 50 years, and the gas is still burning. Somewhere way down in the fire is the original rig, somewhere very hot to touch. And although this seems like a pretty obvious place to avoid, it's been a major tourist destination for years. Curious travelers trek across the desert to witness the gates of hell in all of its burning glory.
However, this place could be forbidden soon. In 2022, the president of Turkmenistan ordered his government to put the fire out. It hasn't been snuffed out just yet, but the government is trying to subdue the flames and stop people from wandering into the Karakum Desert. Would you ever visit the Karakum Desert of Turkmenistan to see the gates of hell for yourself? Let me know in the comments.
Number 7. The Kuril Islands. There is a string of islands north of Japan, south of Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, and very far from everything else. The Kuril Islands is the name of the volcanic archipelago that consists of 56 individual islands and a lot more smaller islands. Throughout the 56 islands, the population is spread thin at only 20,000. But unlike so many beautiful remote islands in the Pacific, you won't find tourists on the Kuril Islands. This place has been in the middle of a land dispute between Russia and Japan since World War II. The Japanese say the southernmost islands are theirs, while Russia says it all belongs to them. But the true history of the island goes back much further than this petty squabble between nations. It was the Ainu people who inhabited the Kuril Islands in the days before the 17th century. However, nobody knows how long they were there. We have no records of these people up until the age of exploration. They left behind very little in the way of archaeological evidence and definitely no written records. What we do know is that during the Edo period, which lasted from 1603 to 1868, the Japanese administration took control of the islands. Around that same time, Russian Cossacks landed on the islands and claimed them for themselves. By the time the 19th century came to an end, Imperial Japan had forced the assimilation of the native Ainu people. They didn't wipe them out, but they did grant them automatic Japanese citizenship and absorbed them into their culture. So they wiped them out in a different way. The Ainu were required to take Japanese names and give up any religious practices native to the island. They had to stop tattooing, seize all sacrifices, and destroy their past. There may have been ruins on the islands at some point of an ancient civilization, but the Japanese likely destroyed them. Number 6. The Paris Morgue. In 1864, a new kind of theater opened in the city of Paris. The theater was completely free. Anyone could go on any day of the week, and street vendors got rich from peddling nuts and fruit to the curious new patrons. But it wasn't a French play that they were watching, and it wasn't a musical recital. This was the Paris Morgue. The exhibition hall had a wall of curtains, and on the other side of that wall was a display of rapidly rotting corpses. The Paris Morgue was one of the most popular places to be in the 19th century. It was more popular than most museums are today, with an estimated 40,000 people a day filing through the exhibition hall to gawk at the decaying human bodies. Many of these bodies had just been pulled out of the river, so they were encrusted with barnacles or brutally picked over by the fish. Despite the awful appearance of the recently deceased, people still lined up to gape through the plate glass viewing window and into the morgue. The original purpose of the exhibition hall was to trick the public into identifying the unclaimed dead who showed up at the city morgue. But according to Vanessa Schwartz from the University of Southern California, it was also a show. She compared it to reality TV or a true crime documentary, saying the Parisians couldn't get enough of it. They had murder victims, river bodies, and other mysteries and dramas unfolding right before their eyes. But of course, not everybody was so impressed with the vulgar display. One visiting student from Harvard wrote in 1885 that the spectacle was grim, and that those watching were thirsty with greediness. Parents held up their children to better see the rotting corpses in the room, and people elbowed and shoved to get a better look at the blank faces of the dead. The public exhibition hall was finally closed in 1907 because it didn't seem moral anymore. The Paris Morgue is still around, but it's obviously forbidden to watch dissections and autopsies. Number 5. Dead Man's Island. Off the coast of Vancouver, British Columbia, there is a small island barely big enough to support a house. It's at the southern part of Stanley Park in Cole Harbour, given the name of Dead Man Island in 1937. Throughout its history, the island has been a place of battle, a cemetery, and a secret hideaway for smallpox sufferers. It's currently home to the HMCS Discovery, a division of the Royal Canadian Navy Reserve. The first mention of the island comes from John Morton, who visited in 1862. John was one of the first white settlers of Vancouver and discovered hundreds of mysterious red cedar boxes secured to the trees on the island. Several of these red boxes had broken open, and they lay on the ground in fragments of smashed wood, black hair, and pale white bones. As John would soon learn, the island was used as a tree burial ground by the Squamish people for centuries. This seemed to encourage John more than dissuade him, and he tried to purchase the island for himself. He only changed his mind when a local chief told him the story about a battle that happened between the rival tribes on the island, in which 200 warriors died. He thought of all that blood and death, finally convinced John to leave the island alone. Instead of building a house on it, settlers in Vancouver used it as their own cemetery up until 1887. The misuse of the island continued in the years that followed. Vancouverites used Dead Man's Island as a quarantine site for those inflicted with smallpox. Even today, the island is being used by the Canadian Navy instead of being left alone as an Aboriginal heritage site. There is currently a dispute between the city of Vancouver and the First Nations tribes, who claim the island is their land and should be left alone since it is a burial ground. What do you think should become of Dead Man's Island? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 4. Mount Athos. Mount Athos in Greece is home to some of the most beautiful monasteries in the world. There are over 20 monasteries on the peninsula, where an estimated 700 monks enjoy long lives of chastity. These monks devote their lives to prayer and maintenance, worshiping God, fasting, repairing, and studying. The monasteries are breathtaking, built on the edge of great cliffs and overlooking the blue waters of the Aegean Sea. And while the monasteries do welcome visitors, none of them allow women visitors inside. Since the year 382 AD, it has been utterly forbidden for any female of any kind, including everything from a pig to a human, to step foot on Mount Athos. To visit Mount Athos and see its monasteries for yourself, you need to submit your passport to the Pilgrims Bureau. They allow 100 Orthodox males onto the island per day, and 10 non-Orthodox males who wish to visit. Any women have to stay behind at the ferry terminal and wait. They haven't been on the island in 1,000 years, and it's all because of a legend involving Virgin Mary and a stray wind. Tradition has the Virgin Mary was on her way to Cyprus when her sailing ship got stranded on Mount Athos. She loved the island and its mountains so much that she called it the Garden of the Mother God. Mary said she would be the only woman to ever step foot on it. Early Christian monks in Greece took the story very seriously. It was already understood that women were not allowed in monasteries, but they took the rule to an extreme level by forbidding them to step foot on their island. It's a total no girls allowed zone. Number 3. The Cenacle. The Cenacle is perhaps the holiest place in Christianity that you've never heard of. According to tradition, this is the site where Jesus had his Last Supper. It's the very room in which Jesus Christ sat with his 12 disciples and shared a meal during Passover. It was the eve of his death, right before he was betrayed and crucified. The room is on Mount Zion, just outside the old city walls of Jerusalem. It's a simple room inside a stone building that you would never guess was the site of such a fantastic piece of history. Mount Zion is considered the holiest place on the planet to Christians and the closest possible location to God. The tomb of David is supposedly hidden just beneath the cenacle as well, but that's a whole story of its own. The New Testament says that Jesus gave his disciples wine and bread, and that the wine symbolized his blood and the bread his flesh. He sat in this room with his disciples and feasted, and then a bunch of other exciting things happened after his death. The disciples continued to meet here briefly after Jesus Christ was killed. This was also the place where on the Pentecost, the disciples of Jesus gathered and felt the Holy Spirit fill them, and they spoke in many languages. It was from this room that the disciples each embarked upon their own mission, spreading Christianity to the farthest reaches of the globe. An archaeological survey conducted in 1948 by Jacob Pinkerfeld revealed the original structure was likely a synagogue, then later remodeled by early Jewish Christians. But so much destruction has happened here that it's proved difficult to date every piece of the structure. It may have been destroyed during the siege of Jerusalem by Roman general Titus in 70 AD. Most scholars believe the current room dates back only 800 years to the Crusades, when the Knights Templar built a cathedral here. Regardless how old the room is, Christians view it as the place where Jesus last died before his death. It's part of the same complex that hosted Pentecost, the resurrection, and the washing of the feet. You are allowed inside the room, but only with a guided tour, and don't even try to touch anything. It's the holiest room in Jerusalem. Number 2. The Red Forest. Shortly after midnight on April 26, 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. It was one of the greatest radioactive disasters of all time, releasing invisible radioactive dust into the atmosphere. The roof of the reactor collapsed, the core continued to melt, and huge plumes of smoke wafted into the sky. Near the plant, a large patch of pine trees was hit by a particularly strong blast of radiation. The trees turned red and then died. All these years later, this little stretch of woods is called the Red Forest. Scientists believe it's still the most radioactive outdoor environment on our planet. The Red Forest is about 400 hectares. It received the most significant dosage of fallout in the surrounding area. Most trees died immediately, wilting within minutes to a deep red or a rusty orange color. Based on information released at an international conference in 1996, the soil of the Red Forest was contaminated with over 400 times more radioactive material than what was released at Hiroshima. The bomb that decimated Hiroshima in World War II only released 3 million curies of radiation. Chernobyl spewed out about 200 million, give or take a few million. The forest is still considered an exclusion zone, a forbidden area nobody is allowed to enter because it's simply too dangerous. Number 1. The Greenbrier Bunker. In 1955, Americans were scared of a nuclear holocaust. President Eisenhower instructed the Department of Defense to come up with an emergency plan that would save Congress if a nuclear bomb hit America. The plan needed to be foolproof, accounting for what would happen if a nuclear strike hit Washington, D.C., and the White House was obliterated. The Department of Defense ordered the Army Corps of Engineers to find a suitable location for a nuclear bunker. They decided on White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. They built the secret nuclear bunker underneath a luxury resort called Greenbrier. The site was chosen because of its relative closeness to Washington, and because it was believed to be a safe distance from any atomic target. Greenbrier also served as an internment camp in World War II, when Japanese, Italians, and Germans were held against their will. Then it was a military hospital and later a luxury resort. Construction started in 1957. Although the government tried to keep it a secret, locals were suspicious immediately. The government claimed they were building a new wing, but the amount of concrete going in was ridiculous. One of the construction workers was quoted as saying, "Nobody came out and said it was a bomb shelter, but even a fool would have known." After the installation of 110 urinals, it became pretty clear to everyone involved that there wasn't a new exhibition hall being installed. The project cost $14 million and was finished in 1962. It was buried 720 feet underground and could withstand a nuclear blast from 30 miles away. As we now know, there never was a nuclear war, The bunker remained a secret until 1992, but was never used for anything. The bunker was decommissioned, but its ruins are still at Greenbrier. You're allowed to take a peek, but only on a private tour, and you're not allowed to bring any cameras into the bunker. Thanks for watching! Which forbidden place would you like to visit if you could? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe! See you next time! Bye!